Hey everyone, hope you're doing well today. Today I figured I'd take a look at a series of games that's completely new to me, and that's the Kid Niki series on the NES and Famicom systems. Now, of course, Kid Niki is not a name unfamiliar to those who owned an NES back in the day. It wasn't an uncommon game to see in someone's pile of NES games on the living room floor back in the 80s. The game never seemed to capture any sustained collective interest in the US though, so we only got the first title in the series here. Kid Niki must have struck somewhat of a chord in Japan though, because the game received not one but two sequels in the East, and after having played all three of them, I think they're all worth talking about and playing, so here we go. The first installment of the series is the only one to be released in both the US and Japanese markets, and it's a pretty simplistic affair. Okay, let's be real, it's really simplistic. I know what you're probably thinking. Man, I love the NES, don't get me wrong, but this might be a little too old school for me. Honestly, you might be right. The game almost looks like it could nestle right in between the Atari and NES eras. It's like right in the middle. Obviously, Super Mario Bros. Does too, but we don't need to talk about the exception there. Here, there's not much going on graphically, and the gameplay is pretty simple. It's a standard side-scroller with one simple attack that juts out straight ahead of you, and the enemy design certainly isn't anything to brag about. And there's only one power-up, and it doesn't really affect the gameplay much at all, to be honest. So, what's to like here? Well, I really think the simple gameplay is a strong suit. It was refreshing for me to take this game for a spin. I didn't have to worry about performing any special moves or knowing what a bunch of different icons meant, or how to navigate to the end of each level. It's a good game. I'm serious. Sure, it's yet another side-scroller with absolutely no frills to speak of, but that's what I like about it. If you're into retro games, I'm not sure how you're not loving side-scrollers anyways, so that part shouldn't really matter. And the lack of depth is frankly kinda nice. Anyone can jump right in and play this, which I think is notable. As far as the difficulty, you'd think it'd be really easy, but it's actually right in the sweet spot for me personally. I got stuck on a few rough spots, but persevered and eventually got through. The bosses are actually kind of fun, and like the rest of the game, they put up just enough of a fight that it kept me interested the whole way through. Now, there are some flaws here. I'm not a huge fan of one-hit deaths, and it would be great to have some more control over your weapon, but playing this game is kind of a no-lose situation. It's not going to be your favorite game of all time by any stretch, but you can beat it in a couple of play sessions, and it's just difficult enough to give you the satisfaction of knocking it off your list. Now we move on to the Famicom-only sequel, which is officially titled Kaiketsu Yanshimaru 2 Kakuri Land. Excuse the goofy attempt at a proper accent there, I am trying. Anyways, I'm happy to report that this game is a logical and successful progression of what the first game offered. There's a world map that offers a little bit of level choice. Also, you can now collect items that allow you to transform into different animals to traverse certain parts of the game. The control is somewhat improved, and you can use your weapon now in different directions. Most importantly, you actually have hearts instead of one-hit deaths, which improves the gameplay immensely. As far as the visuals, you can see the graphical improvement immediately just by watching this video. Everything just looks more three-dimensional, and I don't mean that in a technical sense. It's all just more vibrant and appealing to the eye. The levels have a nice variety, and we actually get a suitable number of music tracks this time, which was a problem in the first game. The bosses are creative and fun to contend with in this game as well. If you had a tepid reaction to the first game, just know that the sequel absolutely improves on it in every way. I don't have a lot of complaints with this one, quite honestly. I'd point out that the animal transformations and power-ups hardly need to be used, so there's a flaw in the design there. But otherwise, it's a very solid Famicom title. The cartridge goes for $30 or more at the moment, so keep that in mind if you're trying to get a hold of it. But if you can find a way to play this one, I would. It's definitely deserving of a playthrough. The third game in the series, which is also on the Famicom, is simply titled Kaiketsu Yanshimaru 3, and it's a bit of a departure from what we've seen so far. The visual style has changed noticeably, and I'm really not sure if that's for the better. I prefer the more kiddie main character designs from the first two games myself. This game is still colorful and pleasing to the eye, though. Developer Irem continued to innovate in this third installment as well. You can now use your weapon to wall jump, hop on it like a pogo stick, which lets you defeat enemies and avoid spikes, and it also acts like a projectile now too. I like all these added features, and it's nice to see that the devs didn't rest on their laurels. The level design has some verticality to it now, which is another interesting wrinkle. You have to find keys to open the next part of the level every so often too. I'm not sure that part was really necessary, but again, I like the mentality of continuing to give players something new. The levels themselves again boast good variety in all aspects. I want to like this game as much as the second one, and on paper it seems like I should for all the reasons I just mentioned. A couple things drag it down for me though. The wall jumping is neat, but I find it to be a little unreliable at times, and it can be confusing as far as how much or how little you need to hold down the B button before you can spring upward. Also, this game definitely has some cheap hits in it. Not nearly enough for me to abandon it entirely, but you can see why the health bar was made to be pretty generous this time. The total package in terms of difficulty is a little sloppy in my opinion. Lastly, the frame rate is just not smooth enough. I don't have the capability to measure such things, but it's clear to me this game isn't running at 30 frames per second, and if it is, then there's something just janky going on graphically. I might not have even mentioned the other nitpicks if the game just ran as expected, so that's kind of a bummer. Overall, I like this one, and I'd still give it a light recommendation, but I wanted to like it a lot more. If you want to pick it up, you're looking at $100 or more, so you'll want to make sure this is a cart that you really feel strongly about owning if you go after it. So, what do you make of the Kid Niki series? To me, it's a relatively successful one. The first game is fun, if a little simplistic. The sequel is a game I think any 8-bit enthusiast should play. And the third game has more pros than cons, if you ask me. As you might have expected, the second game is my favorite for sure, and I had a great time playing it. All of these games last about as long as you'd want them to, with difficulty that won't frustrate, but will still have you concentrating to the end. If you're not familiar with these, by all means give them a try. It's an interesting set of games, and I think they'll keep your attention throughout each installment. So have any of you played the Famicom sequels I talked about here? Or do you have a Kid Niki cart that you could dust off and play right now? Leave me a comment below, because I'd love to hear what you think of these games. I think they're pretty fun overall. Take care of yourself, and I'll see you next time.